Good morning and welcome back to Wake Up and Dream. We are always so happy to have you guys listen in. And we were just chatting right before we pressed the live button here to record about Lisa's amazing weekend that she had. And it kind of, we started asking, Kelly and I started asking a ton of questions, and we're like, hold on, we need to record this because I feel like it's an amazing thing, not only that she did because she pivoted last minute, and we'll get into it in a little bit on what that means, but also just an experience of being with oneself that is just so empowering. And I wanted to just pick everything out of Lisa's brain that she was able to gather from this weekend. But I was like, okay, maybe we should share this with our listeners as well. So Lisa had booked a retreat that they ended up not getting enough participants for, but she didn't let that stop her. And she ended up changing around a little bit about what her weekend and what this retreat looked like. And I just wanted her to share a little bit more about, first off, this amazing place that you stayed in that I don't know that I would have been as brave to stay in. So I'm sure Lisa will describe that in great detail. And then also just the experience of having quiet time with just you and your thoughts and how that felt. Like, even saying that out loud, I cannot remember a time in my recent past where I allowed myself to do that outside of maybe like a 20-minute walk, where I have nothing on. But having an entire weekend where that is the sole focus, it's just a very a unique experience that I feel like you were able to have over the weekend. And I just want to hear more about it.
Okay. Well, when you said pick my brain, I thought, I don't know if there's much up there for you to be picking at. I was like, oh, this is a little scary. I feel like I'm like, on the table and you're going to, open my brain and see what's in there. And you might be shocked.
I mean, honestly, in the place that you stayed, I'm surprised that didn't happen in some capacity because it was a little
uh,
scary looking.
no, it wasn't scary at all. I stayed, and I think it was I could be wrong, but it was, I think, an old monastery. So it was this big square, beautiful architectural building that was literally in a square with a courtyard in the middle, and the chapel took up part of that center as well. um and the whole downstairs, you can't get lost because you literally just walk in the square or the circle around. But there were so many different rooms, and she kind of gave me a tour when I got there. But I'm going to back up because um retreats, the word retreat, I just looked it up, and it is like, pulling away after a defeat. Like, in battle, when they would have, they would be like beaten up, and in battle, they would retreat. And I think, not that we need to exaggerate, but I think sometimes life in itself feels like a battle. We feel, last week in particular, I felt like, in my mind, it wasn't necessarily any circumstances, but in my mind, I felt like I was a wave getting tossed here. Do I believe this? Do I believe this? She said this, and they believe this, and I just felt like my emotions were totally not stable. Like, they were just going everywhere. And I I got to a place where I was like, so I need to figure out, like, with God, what is truth? What do I believe? Like, because there are so many loud voices going on in my life and my experiences. And that was my intention. I set an intention for my weekend to get quiet, to listen, to be open to receive, to spend time connecting with God, and and reground myself in what I believe and what I feel is, you know, the direction of my life, or just what really is what that truth is.
And
So
that's
that
absolutely
so
incredible, Lisa, because I give you kudos for just knowing that's what you needed, right? Like we all hear this outside noise, everybody's opinions, this or that. She says this, she's telling me I should do this or feel this way. And you just felt like, wait a second, what is truth? What I need this time for myself to really figure out this next step, this next season, what I really want, what is truth from God. And this was absolutely incredible for you because I think a lot of us feel like this is just how it is. This is what momhood is. This is what being this, and you just like it's always just supposed to be chaotic because everybody else is chaotic. But you
yeah,
knew that this isn't how you wanted to feel.
And
right.
I also think that the events of last week leading up to this were timely because it caused you to reflect on like, okay, this is where things are right now in this chaos kind of zone, but I have this opportunity coming up right around the corner to flip the script on this. So even though all of those emotions and all of those things came up last week for you, I feel like that was like really good timing because you went in with super strong intentions in what you wanted to accomplish that weekend. Maybe you would have had intentions anyway, but I feel like it just kind of drove that point
Totally.
home.
Yeah, it really did. And, looking back at the last 2 weeks, it was building. It was like the storm was brewing and my emotions, I felt less, stable, less grounded, all of the things. And I knew I needed to get away, and connect with God, connect with myself, connect with nature. I've realized that, one of my core values is connection, and feeling connected is so valuable and important to me. So, um, I stayed in one of, I don't know if it was, I thought she said there were 80 rooms, but maybe I have that number wrong. But I had my own room, and for the majority of the weekend, I was there by myself. And, depending on, your personality and your comfort level, maybe that wouldn't have been like,
80 rooms. I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know if that would have been
I
that
just went up the stairs and went to my room.
the
It wasn't
vastness
scary.
of this image that you're
It's
painting for
really,
us. It's
it was an amazing experience. And I got there like Friday afternoon, about supper time, and she gave me the tour and then she left. And my mind was still racing. Like, okay, so I've got 2.5 days and I want to journal, I want to read, I want to listen to this training, I want to, make sure I walk the hiking trails that she said. I had this, oh, and they have a piano in the chapel. I want to make sure that I get to play the piano and sing and all the things. And so I like that. I mean, I'm purposely saying it in the intensity that I was feeling it when I first arrived.
do
I
they have
was like,
meals and stuff like already mapped out for you? Or how did that
so
work?
so when you do a retreat like that, they had one meal because there was a group that came in Saturday, over the noon hour, and so they had a hot meal that I participated with 15 others. Um, but the majority of it, they called it the refrigerator special. I just paid to be able to, you know, access their leftovers from, what they served the day before, or their salad bar kind of, put on a shelf kind of thing. So, and then, it was also cool because I got to, eat whenever I want, sleep whenever I want. It's like, setting my intention to just rest, and to, instead of like, I started with, okay, these are the things that I want to make sure that I do. They also had a labyrinth, um in do you guys know anything about a labyrinth? Oh my gosh.
No, I
They're
was just
my
gonna say, please tell what this
it,
fabulous thing is. I'm sure.
so so a labyrinth, and I always pronounced it wrong, but I think I got it. It is, and there's history, and I'm not a historian, so forgive me, but back in ancient times, they created these, circular paths. And it was a way to pray, a way to meditate while you're walking. And so um, if you picture not concentric circles, but a winding path, and then you'd kind of, you'd be going clockwise, and then you'd go counterclockwise a while, then you'd go back counterclockwise, and then you'd go all the way around, but eventually it took you to center. And I ended my retreat by walking this, but I'll come back to that because it was so powerful. It was probably like one of my favorite parts of my weekend. But I allowed myself to like literally just like come down. And literally it took me till Sunday to feel like I was in a place of rest, and then I had to leave. Like if I could have stayed 2 more days to experience true rest, I think that would have been even better. But I knew that I was going to, these are the things that I wanted to like, experience during the week, or during the weekend. And I unplugged. I turned my phone on do not disturb. I told my kids, this is where I'm at. And I asked the question often throughout the weekend, what should I be doing next? What's next on the agenda? And I just kind of allowed it to unfold. I did a lot of reading. Friday night, I did quite a bit of reading and journaling. I'm in a group, and there was this one course that had several lessons pertaining to just things that I'm going through right now. And so I was able to listen to her trainings, take notes, like be like she was the speaker at my retreat, like when I felt led to learn and take in new information, that was my go-to as far as that. It was rainy and kind of cloudy most of the day, but the grounds, there was 40 acres of like trails and hiking, and they had the Stations of the Cross. And I've never done the Stations of the Cross. Like, I visited a grotto once way back when, but these were in nature. So I had nature all around me. And, there's just these rock formations with the basic scene of the days, well, not the days, the crucifixion, from Jesus falling to the women weeping to Peter helping Jesus carry his cross, like just different things. And what struck me like so significantly is I felt my body literally just calm down, like the race of life. As the weekend went on, it was like, oh yes, peace is washing over me, and I'm just coming to this place of silence, of opening, of receiving. And as I walked from each station, and it was, in the woods, long distances in between each station, there was a bench by each station. You got to look into this little, glass window and see the scene of the station. And I was just overwhelmed with how human Jesus was. Like, that was probably my biggest takeaway, is that he could empathize with all of the battle of my week prior. He empathized. He was weak. He fell. He allowed someone to help him to carry his cross. And I'm like, but you're God. Like, you don't need someone to carry your cross. You don't, you could have showed up in power in that moment, but he didn't. He felt, and he allowed the people around him to feel the emotions of pain, of agony, of sorrow, of confusion. And as I walked, I was like, oh my gosh, like these are all the emotions of humanity, but they're all the emotions that were right at the top of my life in that moment. And I'm like, I was so struck by how Jesus felt all those things and how he can empathize with me when I feel all those feels. Because I think sometimes we as humans, we just think we should be superhumans 24/7, especially mamas, right? And we don't. I'll just speak for myself. I don't allow myself to be human, if that makes sense. I don't allow myself the safety, the the place to have those uncomfortable emotions. And so I just wept. I wept imagining that experience for Jesus, but I also saw the pain in the other people's eyes, like them wiping his face because there's sweat and blood and he can't even see, you know, and what did that feel like? And I was just struck by what people really need more than anything else is for someone to empathize with their reality. And
Oh,
that's the art of being human, right? We're so quick to I'll put myself, under the bus, but we're so quick to think we have to have a solution or, plan our next response to them. And it was like I was just in the moment feeling all the feels. And that was so powerful for me.
and so powerful. That's literally the word I was going to use, Lisa, because I could just feel exactly what you were feeling. And it is that we look for that empathy in all the wrong places sometimes. We look for it in social media. We look for it in our neighbor. We look for it, at some mom that we've met in our kids' lives, right? And like our friends and even family, right? That we want that validation from them. But really, it's really with our Lord and Savior. And I've actually had this exact experience that you're describing when I was going through infertility, and I was towards the tail end when we've kind of decided like we're done trying officially, like I need to rebuild myself, I need happiness again. And I actually went down the street from where we lived in Colorado. This was right before we left for Kentucky, and I did go through this amazing Catholic church that was on this like hilltop, if you will, through the Stations of the Cross. And it was, I hadn't done that probably since I was 13 or 14 years old. And it was absolutely incredible to have that just solitude with him and
Mhm.
myself, where I was allowing
Mhm.
him in and I was ready to receive. And yes, I cried through the whole thing too, because I wanted his empathy. I wanted to feel what he
Mhm.
felt and vice versa. And I just remember those moments, this kind of going back to how you started, like you knew you needed a restart. You knew that you needed to feel the truth for
Mhm.
yourself, not the outside world. And sometimes, and whether that's Stations of the Cross, whether that's just sitting outside, in the mountains, whether it's just taking a walk, whether it's going to the beach, whether it's, sitting in your favorite sitting room in your own home, but taking that
Exactly.
time for
Mhm.
yourself to
Mhm.
find your true truth for what you
Mhm.
believe in, your values, your goals. It's so, so important. I'll just second everything you've said about making this like a priority. And women
Right.
need to do that. Women need to do it. If it's for an
Yes.
hour, if a weekend, 3 weeks, whatever. Like, it's so important.
It's so important because I think in the rat race of life, we forget to think about like what is really important and to refuel. Like we're only as good as, how we're taking care of ourselves. The other connection that I thought was so powerful for me was their trail went by the river and then ended up going over this beautiful little bridge and this little like brook, little stream, little rock, the rocks and the water. You could hear the bubbling of the brook, and there was a bench there, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like my favorite place in the entire 40 acres right here. I could have stayed there forever. I just listened to the water. I I looked around at nature, and here in Wisconsin, like our buds on our trees are barely open. Like we're still, I mean, maybe a little hint of green, like we're not, we're still waiting for it. Um, and as I sat there and literally like you could just feel the power of nature and our emotions, like, I was like, I just came down another notch of that peace, that relaxation, that, okay, I can just be. Because when I looked out at the trees and at the water, I I just had this conversation with myself, and this is, you can laugh at me if you want, but this is how it went down for me. I thought, so let's say that I could personify nature. And so I personified molecules of water. And I was watching the water that was going over the rocks. And I was like, if I was a little molecule of water going down this stream, it would be really tempting for me to go, I want to go that way. No, no, but not over that rock. No, I can't do that. This path is better over here. And you're going too fast. And I don't even know where we're going. Like this is scary. Okay, so I had all of that like roll out in my little head. You want to know how scary this brain is? And I thought, but no, that's not how the water is. The water is just being. The water is allowing and surrendering. And yeah, maybe going over that rock hurt, right? I mean, if you personify water, right? Maybe it did hurt a little bit, or maybe it wasn't the desired path that they would have chosen, but they trusted the process. It was like this surrender, like on display right before me in this little brook of like, just trust the process. Like, they're not fretting, these little molecules of water, they're not fretting about where the path's going to take them. They're not worried that they're going to get there. Like they just allowed the process.
And it
And
seems
then I
like
looked up,
that's what you did during the week, because when you
yeah,
got there, you're like, I want to play the piano, I want to go on a walk, and I want to do this, and I want to have time to my journal, and I want to read
uh-huh,
this. And you just decided
yeah,
to let it unfold. Let the
let it unfold.
days, let the hours just bring to you what nature, God, spirit needed for you, and to not make those decisions. You're not being a mom or a wife or a teacher or a podcaster. You were just being Lisa Taylor
Yeah.
and letting, oh, so good. So good.
Two quick things. One, Lisa, I feel like you may not even realize this, but I feel like I tell you this a lot. Water always comes back to you, always. And the word flow always comes back. And when you were just describing that personification of the water, I'm like, say the word flow, say the word flow. Like, cause you just like, like that's what you
Right.
were describing. You're just the
Yes.
letting go and releasing control. I know we've been talking a lot about release, and just when you were
Mm-hmm.
describing that, I'm like, you have to just let things flow. And I need to work on that a lot, especially in the coming weeks.
But it's so cool that we don't even have to look farther than the trees, the water, everything in
Yeah.
nature, like these buds. I looked up at the trees and I'm like, they're not up there like having a hissy fit that they haven't opened up yet. When are you going to make a leaf? Like, for crying out loud, last year at this time, I already had leaves. They're not having that argument with
Yeah.
God, their creator. They are releasing the timeline. They are being. They are just being. And I was like, oh, I can learn so much from all of the nature that God has also created. It was just so
So good.
powerful, so good for me. And the last thing I did before I left on Sunday was I walked back down to the bubbling brook and spent some time, because that was my favorite flow spot. But then I walked this labyrinth, and they had I have walked one where they actually put a rope out, just like as a temporary one that they created. But this one was like permanent. They had actually dug out the trail, the path, and over the years it had grown grass back. So like the edges of the path were higher grass than the path that I walked on. So I took my shoes and socks off because I wanted to feel the earth. I wanted to feel grounded. I wanted to experience it in any way I could possibly experience. And so there was a little brochure that talked about suggestions of how to benefit most from the labyrinth. And um, as you walk in, they talked about suggesting having prayers and thoughts and meditations on surrender, on releasing the things, on letting go of the things that aren't serving you. How timely, right? I mean, it was the best retreat ever, and it was just me and God. It was amazing. So that's, I walked, and and they talked about you're going to go counterclockwise, and then you're going to go clockwise, and that's with intention, because sometimes we think we're going this way and life takes us the opposite way. And so the symbolism, and I'm out there in nature, there's nobody but me and God, just walking this labyrinth, and I walked it slow and deliberate, and I prayed and I meditated, and I allowed the thoughts to go, and I released a lot of things. Um, and then when you get to the center, it's a very personal, like spiritual experience, because you see all the circles around you, but you're in the center, and they had a bench in the center, and the center represents God. It represents being wrapped in his arms, just being completely safe. It's just you and God. And I'm reading several books right now, but Jenna Greshmeyer has a book called Altogether You, and it talks about how we all have different parts of ourselves. We've got child parts that haven't grown up yet. So when you're feeling angry, or you're feeling lonely, or you're feeling depressed, those are parts of you that are child parts that you know haven't matured, or haven't fully aligned with your God center. And so this whole book it's from a Christian perspective, but it's based on Dr. Richard Swartz's internal family systems, which he created, this therapy model. And so your God center is like your completely secure, safe self. There's none of the negative emotions live in your center, because God created each of us in his image. So this center of us is our God image. Any good that comes out of us is from that God center. And that's what I felt in that moment, sitting on that bench in the center of these concentric circles. I was like, I feel completely safe. I feel completely loved. I feel completely wanted, desired, delighted in, just adored, like all the things, all the needs that we have as humans. I felt emotionally in the center of that labyrinth. And then, as I didn't want to leave, I honestly just wanted to stay there, because it was like, oh my gosh. And the feelings, as I knew I needed to go back out, there was like this emotion, like, I don't want to, like, I feel completely, it's like, when you feel that safety, you just don't want to leave it, but that, the world awaits, right? You got people in your life, you got circumstances, you're going to have to go back in the world. You can't live in this bubble, right? So the going out in the brochure described how, you're retracing your steps. So it's this kind of not cacophony, but this blend of the release that you did, meeting up with you retracing your steps, and now you thinking about, how can I take what I have learned and what I have experienced back with me into my life, into my world, into my relationships. And it can also be a place of intercession where you would, be praying for others. But I let it unfold, and as I got farther and farther away from the center, there was a real mix of emotions, but I knew that my God center I was taking that with me. Like, I didn't leave that in the center of my circle. And it was just such a powerful experience to just be alone, allow the thoughts, allow the prayers, allow the feelings and the emotions, because I think we don't do that. We don't do that. We are quick to throw on a mask and say, "Oh yeah, I'm great. How are you?" And we've talked about that. So that's my experience in a nutshell. This retreat, I would highly recommend it for anyone and everyone, whether that be you check into a hotel and get away and, go to a park nearby, do something and maybe being alone with yourself is like, I'm asking you to do something scary and very uncomfortable. But I encourage you to try it, because it really is. It's been life-changing for me. And this is my heart. This is what I see in my future, being able to offer retreats that would create the opportunity for other women to have a similar experience to what I did.
Oh, Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your amazing experience with us. This has been absolutely enlightening and encouraging and uplifting, because it's so true. Like, I think like the biggest takeaway on your last part there was, sometimes we go away on these trips or we have these experiences, and then we go back into the real world and everything's waiting for us. We're back in our offices. We're back, packing lunches and soccer practice. However, I feel like you started to talk about on your way out was that you recognize that you can take that feeling, that spirit with you. It takes intention, and you have to be intentional every single day to know where your heart center is, your values, your goals, what you really want out of life. Don't go home and just get back into the rut of things. This is like a new beginning, a new freedom that you're experiencing. And I love that you were so vulnerable and you opened up to us and our listeners. There's so many takeaways from here, Lisa, that I hope our listeners can just dive into, get a little serious with themselves, setting those intentions every single day. So thank you, Lisa. Love your heart. But with that, until next time, we hope you wake up and dream.